place. This is APA Ohio Policy Platform webinar. We're going to be led today by myself and Jason Russell, both board members with APA Ohio. Quick introduction, I'm the Planning Development Director in Hamilton County, past president of APA Ohio and current board member. Jason?
My name is Jason Russell. I'm a current member of APA Ohio, and I'm the co-chair of the Legislative Committee. And by day, I work for RMS Investments, which does real estate development in Northeast Ohio.
Okay, we're going to let the webcast coordinator, give us a few ground rules, and then we'll get into the presentation. And just to explain how this is going to work, we're going to present a few slides, and then we're going to open up for questions, and then we're going to then have a few more slides, and we'll be done. So, Chris.
Hey, everybody. It's Christine Dursey-Davis. I'm the executive director of the Ohio chapter of APA. And a couple things. As our presenter said, they're going to go through a couple slides, and then we're going to open it up to you all. This is going to be an interactive format, which is the intention. So we need you all to participate to make this as worthwhile as it can be. So in order for you to ask questions or make any comments during the specific period, the way in which you're going to do this, if you've been on our webcast before, it's going to be a little different. If you go over into your GoToWebinar tool panel, you're going to have the option to raise your hand. You're going to see a little hand, so you can raise it. And then that'll give me the clue that you have something to say. And then I will announce your name and then take you off of mute so that you can actually speak. Now, here's the thing. The majority of you, it appears that you're not calling. Some of you are calling in by phone, but a lot of you are just using the microphone on your computer. So make sure that you know that it works. If not, hang up and call back in with your phone so that we'll be able to hear your voice. If you're not sure, you can always type in if we can't hear you, and then we can just try to answer your question through typing, and that's through the questions box. So again, when you have something to say or a question, just use the raise your hand function, and that'll give me the indication that you would like to speak, and then we'll put you on. So those are the ground rules. The only other thing is we are recording this, so if you want to share it later or go back and review it, it will be available. It'll be up on our website, ohioplanning.org, and I'll send an email after the fact with the link to that. And we'll also have a PDF of this presentation up on our website as well. And lastly, this is worth 1 CM law credit today for live viewing. So that's about it. I'm going to throw it back to you guys.
All right. Thank you, Chris. So this afternoon, we wanted to start off by providing the kind of background and purpose for APA Ohio putting together the policy platform. So as many of you know, APA Ohio has put a big emphasis on being an advocate for the planning field and our profession. I think too often we tell people that we're city planners, and most people don't understand what that is or what we do. And so we, as an organization, have been not only advocating on the local level, but taking up the chain, so to speak, so that some of the elected officials and appointed members who are making decisions and policies at regional and state levels understand the importance of planning and the profession that we all have, and how we need to work together to ensure Ohio is a prosperous place for everyone. And the Because We Plan activity that APA Ohio has been doing for the last several years is really just one way to advocate for ourselves and our profession, and let the general public and others know why it's important to have vibrant and healthy communities here in Ohio. And we've got to be honest, and this is just a confession, APA Ohio, our board, has to address legislative and policy issues, and really in a more robust manner. We want to create a more systematic process. So how do we respond to issues that are happening across Ohio that impact the planning profession? And so the policy platform was really a result of our APA membership survey, understanding what our members wanted the board and the organizations to be doing more of. And we had a board retreat last spring, actually, and we really put down a lot of ideas on what this policy platform should consist of, and then how we utilize it moving forward.
And Jason, I would just add before this next slide that, and part of the reason we're ramping up this effort is because we, quite frankly, in the confession, haven't really been doing this very well in the past. There's been periods where we've done the legislative tracking really well. We've played we've participated in a few judicial cases that have been have a potential impact planning in Ohio, but we really haven't been strongly in this legislative advocacy arena as an organization for a long time. So that's really also part of the motivation.
So,
we back in September, when we kind of released the draft version of this platform, we put it out on the APA website, APA Ohio website, and we sent everyone, a couple emails, essentially asking for your feedback about this platform. We've edited it through the APA board first, so we felt like we covered a lot of the gaps going in. And then there were some things that we just decided we couldn't include at the beginning because we didn't want the platform to be so huge that it would be too much for someone to want to read. So we tried to focus in on the key issues. And but anyway, as part of that, we asked membership what they had to say. So this slide kind of represents the main feedback, and we really, quite frankly, didn't receive a lot of feedback. But I believe the form is still out there if you want to add something, or we're going to be taking it down soon. But anyway, this is the kind of the high level view of that. I don't know if you want to walk through these, Jason, or you want me to do that?
Well, we can walk through a couple of them, but I do want to say, one of the things we got in feedback was the addition of additional subject areas. And one of the things that Todd just alluded to, but I wanted to emphasize a little bit more, is that we want to utilize this policy document or platform as something we can give and share with elected officials. So we wanted to make sure that we kind of honed in on some of the higher priorities items first, because I think one of the blessings and curses of being planners is that our field is so broad, and so we have the ability and really the knowledge to interact in a variety of different areas. But when you're trying to share that with someone more of a lay person, they get a little bit confused because our breadth is so wide. So we wanted to narrow the focus to really have an impact.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say one good example, I mean, as Jason said, planner, what we do is very broad. And one person who made a suggestion that we include something on food systems. And we didn't purposely exclude it. And that's something that we'll have to talk about just as an example of one of the suggestions about, do we include it in the future and what does it say? Again, there were folks who had things to say about historic preservation and some specific items about land use reform. We didn't exclude anything on purpose. I mean, I would argue that the land use piece of it is kind of addressed, but again, it's how do we put together a platform that represents the broad cross-section of our membership, and then how do we present it to elected officials and folks who will read this so that it's meaningful. So it's a bit of a challenge, but anyway, that's the purpose of this webinar today, is to get your feedback.
Mm-hmm. And I think one of the feedbacks we've put on this slide about the planning should span political beliefs and focus on mutually held interests. I thought that was a really good feedback that someone left, because in this very hyper-partisanship society we live in right now, if we start using some buzzwords that one side of the political aisle feels is advocating for another piece, we could lose that individual because they'll make it seem as if it's a partisan issue. But really, we all know it doesn't matter you're red, blue, or purple. Planning impacts us all in a variety of different ways, and we need to make sure that we're addressing those concerns.
Okay, so the question really is, how will this platform be utilized? And I'll be honest with you, I've been on the legislative committee at APA Ohio for a long time, and we have really struggled with our role and how to move forward. And there was a bit of paralysis for really not knowing, how to wrap your hands around this huge monster of what can be, legislative and advocacy for an organization related to planning. So we finally honed in on putting down kind of these clear statements of what we believe and what are our priority areas. So that was kind of our motivation, and quite frankly, doing this is new for us. It's kind of doing this as a new role for us. But what this is supposed to say is who we are, what we believe, and also to help create some legitimacy for the organization from elected officials and other groups who are potentially looking to us for comments or input on legislation. So quite frankly, our goal is that the legislature will use this or will look to us. And so that too often, as you know, there are issues at the State House that affect planning, and planners never have input on it. It's typically driven by lobbyists from special interest groups, and we just want to get on that list. So that, quite frankly, is one of our goals, and that's how we hope it will be used. But more directly for the organization, we're hoping that this helps us respond to any short-term legislative challenges, whether it be small cell towers or oil and gas drilling or whatever it may be that comes along. That it helps inform. Secondly, related to that, it helps inform judicial decisions. So as you know, there are cases that come along occasionally that require that, based on their outcome, can have a big impact on other issues or other planning related activities or communities throughout Ohio, and sometimes we need to get involved in those, and this policy document hopefully will help us respond to those. And then lastly, and maybe there's others, but we want this to help aid our members so that when there are things that are happening at the local level, you can look at it and say, well, what does the organization I belong to believe on this topic? So those are kind of the high level areas where we feel like that this can be utilized. Jason, do you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, Todd, one of the things I wanted to add, and Todd, as we mentioned, is one of the senior members on the legislative committee, and I'm new to it. And one of the things that I had suggested is putting together some sort of a document or platform, as we did, that we can get in front of legislative officials now, so that we have built a relationship with them. So we're not just coming because of small cell legislation is in front of them, but rather we've built a rapport with them and they understand what planning is and what APA Ohio does, so that when an issue does come up and we're in front of them and say, hey, the small cell tower legislation is in front of you and here's the changes we want, they understand, like, oh, okay, Jason, or okay, Todd, or oh, okay, other APA Ohio member, I understand where you're coming from, I understand what your organization stands for, and they're more likely to listen to us and give us the time of day, rather than us competing against with the urgency of the legislation you need to pass right now. So I think, Todd, if you don't have anything further on this slide, I think this is the point where we really wanted to open it up and hear from all of you. Some of the questions you may have about the platform, the policy platform that we put together, and/or thoughts that things that could be added to it or how it could be better utilized.
So this is the interactive part where we're relying on you all that are participating to ask questions so that we can have a dialogue.
Okay, so again, everyone remember to just use the raise your hand function on the GoToWebinar tool panel. And I'm not I see everyone who's on this call. I'm not afraid to call on you. Okay, here we go. Eva, you're about to go live. Here you go. Are you there, Eva? Let's see, hold on. She's trying to talk to us. Okay, Eva, can you call in on your telephone then? She says she doesn't have a microphone. If you can call in on your phone, then we can talk to you. Okay, Eva's going to call in on her phone. Who else do we have? And if there's anyone else, I guess I should say, that's on the call that's part of the legislative committee that would like to check in or have any comments to make, we'd be happy to have you talk to us. Interesting. Josh says, how many APA Ohio members are there, and what have other state APA chapters done on this front that we can learn from? That's interesting. So the Ohio chapter itself has 1,200 members, and I don't know if anyone from the legislative committee or Todd or Jason, if you know if any other chapters have done this. And Wendy, if you want to chime in, Wendy Bowler, if you're there and you know anything.
Well, this is Todd. I can start, and then others can jump in. So, when I was the APA chapter president, and I attended the leadership meetings at APA National, I was involved in the advocacy committee there, so I feel like I do have a little bit of a background in terms of what other states are doing. And one of the, quite frankly, the level of expertise on this and involvement from APA chapters around the country is just all over the place. Some are very good and some are not. And I think for a long time we were in that not category. But as we've begun to kind of ramp things up, we're getting some attention from APA National, and they see that we're making an effort. But it's interesting. One of our biggest challenges, and the reason why, this is the whole legislative thing is kind of the elephant, that's hard to figure out, is because our legislative session is so long. In other states, they might meet every 2 years, they might meet 2 months out of the year. And I've talked to some of these states where all the proposed legislation they know about in advance, they review it, they have responses to it. They'll have a lobbyist or they'll show up, but it's a legislative session that might last a month or 2 months or 3 months, and then it's over. And it seems like the Ohio legislature never ends their session. So we constantly, are responding, and that's really where the challenge is. So I would say that we do have some information about how other chapters work. And the ones that, quite frankly, do the best are the ones that actually have a lobbyist and they pay them. That's our challenge, I should say. So, anyway, I don't know if anyone else has comments on this, but
yeah, Wendy's here. Okay, Wendy, go ahead.
Yeah.
Hi, it's Wendy Bowler. I'm actually APA Ohio's rep on the national board. The one thing I want to mention, and I'm actually just now been appointed the vice chair of the National Legislative and Policy Committee, and so I'm a little bit more aware of this, is that APA National has generally worked with federal legislation and, tried to stay aware of what's going on at the states, and the states have them as a resource. And I know APA Ohio has worked with some of their staff to try to develop this type of thing. But from the standpoint of what the National is doing, is they've actually just recently hired somebody specifically to help work with states on moving some of their issues forward. So I'm hoping that in the near future, once they've kind of identified what are the issues with different states, they'll be more of a resource to what APA Ohio is trying to do with their policy platform.
Thanks, Wendy.
Wendy, you still on the line?
I am.
Do you have comments about other states that you think are doing a really good job at this that we should emulate, or do you know?
I think that when I saw this policy platform, I thought I was applauding, because I think you were right. This is one of the biggest things that we've ever done. or that you've ever done, now with the chapter and everything. And I think that gives us the great direction. But I'm also in agreement with you that the best activities I'm seeing out there, or the most progress I'm seeing made, is one, the states that do have their own, advocacy groups, or, that kind of, they're paying somebody to help go out there and advocate for them. The other ones that I'm seeing, are ones where they mine their membership, and we have a large membership. They mine their membership for the people who have good connections with the legislature, the legislators that have support for planning, and then work with them kind of on the side to build whatever activities or whatever crafting the rules that we would like to see in place. So I think part of that is trying to not just find from the board members, but our own members who might have had some interaction with our local legislators.
That's a great comment.
Thanks. Okay, we're gonna try to switch over to Eva again. I think she might have her phone on. Eva, are you there? Still no. Okay, maybe just try typing in whatever your question is, and we can get that answered. Also, it looks like Abe, it looks like you're trying to type something or talk to us. Are you there? Maybe, maybe not. And I'll say while hopefully we're waiting for a couple of these folks to get their sound here. I'll say that, we've had a couple of these legislative kind of action alerts, and particularly the last one that was sent out a couple weeks ago. And we had several members of APA Ohio email or call and say, hey, I have an update on this, or, I have a summary about this that makes this way easier to understand, or this or that. And I found that to be really helpful, that and then forwarded out to everyone. And I think that's more of what we need.
Yeah, I would just add there that, our membership is a resource. And I think sometimes we forget that we're all, well, except for you, Christine, we're all volunteers. I'm sure you do volunteer sometime as well, but, we're all volunteers. So, we all have day jobs. So it's sometimes tough to manage, something like legislative issues, in a state as varied and different as Ohio is. And so it's a bit of a challenge. So one of the goals of this effort by the state board is to engage more people. So hopefully we'll get some more folks who are interested in getting involved. That's my pitch for today.
Hey, Sam, you're good to go.
Hi, this is Sam Perry from Oxford, Ohio, and you might know it as the home of Miami University.
Of course.
As you know, I've provided quite a few comments, and I really appreciate what's been done. So this is really a great step. I guess a question that I just wanted to add is, I wonder if, along with this very nicely formatted policy platform, we might consider some graphics to go along with some of the topics, maybe just a handful of them, and to maybe kind of give a little history to what legislation has happened in the past that might have, been for or against, or might have addressed these topics, to give a little bit of a teaser to some of the readers, if they are legislators, to say, well, okay, this was something that affected the current situation. Just an idea. Maybe it's a bar graph, a pie chart. I have no idea what that might be.
Sam, I think that's a really good comment. I mean, providing imagery not only makes it more presentable, but also easier to understand. But I really like the idea of perhaps inserting legislation that has been passed recently that maybe impacts each of these policy areas, especially because there's an opportunity where people may not have, or legislators, or even just members of the general public, may not have seen that legislation as having an impact on brownfields or climate change or another policy platform area, and being able to highlight that and showing the interconnectivity of all the policy decisions that they are making and how it impacts different fields. I think that could really illuminate how important the field of planning is.
To go along with that, Eva was able to type in, and she suggested that perhaps the various issues can be matched with legislative committees in the Senate and House, and perhaps that's something else that we can do. Obviously, this document is very living. Maybe that's another item that we can sort of add to these topics so that when people are scrolling through, they think, oh, wait, I have a connection with that committee. I've worked with so-and-so on that committee. Perhaps that might be helpful. Do you have any thoughts on that?
So I think to her point about aligning some of these policy platform areas to the different legislative committees, that was one of the things that we had discussed, and Wendy kind of just talked about it too, is finding out who the people are in the different committees, specifically speaking at the State House, and understanding who those individuals are and how the planning field interacts with them. Some of the committees may just focus on rural areas of Ohio, but we all know that we need to be planning on rural, urban, and suburban areas. We all interact very closely with each other, and so it's identifying those individuals who are on those committees that may make decisions on policy that impacts planning. And I think that is a great idea to align these things, and maybe even taking the previous gentleman's point, Sam, and saying, aligning our policy platform to a specific committee. So maybe modifying the document, shrinking it down perhaps just to address this committee in the State House, so that it's a little bit easier for them to understand, and then we can highlight some of the legislation that fits these policy areas that have gone through this committee in the past.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I mean, obviously some of the issues are kind of cross-cutting and be difficult, but clearly some of them are very much, you can associate them with specific committees. And to me, that then helps inform us as an organization of, where do we need to focus our efforts if 3 or 4 or 5 of our focus areas fall under one committee of the legislation of the legislature. So that will help us, and I think it's a great suggestion.
Abe has typed in with a comment question. It relates to whether any sort of companion snapshot fact sheet can provide a similar sort of high-level view of information pertinent to each platform area. So, for example, Lake Erie, 2.5 million acres, 13th largest lake globally by surface area. Great Lakes Basin is 20% of the world's freshwater. I guess just to sort of correlate and kind of ground some of these more high-level topics.
I'm just going to come off and say yes. I think it's a great idea. It goes back to Sam's point of providing that visual aid. We talked about climate change in the document, and the blue-green algae blooms in Lake Erie. But to hit Abe's point, if you set that point and then identify graphically the impact that the freshwater, the Lake Erie has, impacts not just the state of Ohio, but the Great Lakes region, I think that helps take that point really home, and you really get to understand, like, wow, we have to protect Lake Erie. It's this much water. It's the 13th largest freshwater lake in the world. So that it just provides impact and really strengthens our argument. So I think these are really great points. I think what we're hearing is we need to do a little bit more research on some of the legislation that perhaps impacts each of these policy areas, and then also find a really great graphic designer to help us incorporate some of the things that we've heard.
Volunteers are welcome. Another question is, and I'd like to set the stage for this before one of you answers. The question is from Josh, and it's, well, if a lobbyist is the answer, will APA Ohio just hire a lobbyist? So to kind of set the stage, perhaps I might take a moment to explain the structure of APA Ohio. So you have APA National, and most of the states have their own chapter, or they're combined with a few states. So APA Ohio is its own chapter, and it has a board of 22, I think, volunteer board members. We have various committees. One of the committees, obviously, being the legislative committee. I think there's four or five members on the legislative committee, including our two co-chairs who are here with us, Todd and Jason. And there's one staff person who is paid, and that's yours truly. And that is the extent of APA Ohio. And we rely on dues from national and chapter only, and then revenue from our state and regional conferences. So that's kind of the background before I'll let one of you answer, why don't we just hire a lobbyist?
Well, I mean, I think your introduction is helpful in that, first of all, lobbyists are not cheap, and so therein lies if we had endless amounts of money, then I would say yes, let's just hire a lobbyist. And so, but the problem is that if we do that, then we have to modify priorities. Maybe we don't have an executive director, but we have a lobbyist. And again, I think the challenge for us is that, the legislature is in session almost year round, and there's just so many issues that arise, and we have so many different interest groups within our membership, and it's just difficult. So without the financial structure of the organization changing dramatically, I don't see that as being a viable option. But we have thought about it. We've discussed it. And one of the things, so what we've tried to do is figure out, is there a way to tap into other existing resources? And this is where I think that Wendy's suggestion of mining our membership for those who have connections is really a good move. It's really probably the best, most viable approach. There are organizations who care about the things that we care about, whether it's Township Trustees Association or Municipal League or Township or the CCAO or Greater Ohio, or the list goes on, and we probably have members who work for all of those organizations. So part of this is about being more strategic in terms of how we engage our membership. I don't know, Jason, do you have thoughts on that?
No, that was the point I was going to make, Todd. Is we had talked about partnering with other organizations that may have a lobbyist already on staff to help us around a particular issue. And you hit on the fact that the legislature is so long and there are so many issues that it's hard to have. It's very expensive to have a lobbyist who's just keeping track of all those things. But if we could have, for example, the Ohio Municipal League let us know, hey, this is an issue that we really need your support on, and we need some backing, perhaps someday in the future we could get a lobbyist for a very specific issue for this piece of legislation to help contain costs. But in the short term, it's partnering with those other organizations that already have feet on the ground in the state house doing the lobbying, and try to piggyback on them to ensure that the policy platform and priorities that we've established are heard by our legislators.
Pam Davis. Hey, Pam. She wanted us to mention that the Ohio Association of Regional Councils also has a legislative effort. They have a committee and a lobbyist. And hi. And I think that this brings up a good point that, if you are involved in any of these organizations, either on a board or just you happen to work with someone or someone or you have ties, let us know so that, we can start to make those connections. And Ann Clavora, she is on our board, and she is the director of the local Cleveland section. She just said, really appreciating these great ideas. It's be very helpful for members with expertise in specific areas to share that information with us. We would welcome the partnership. And I think that that's absolutely true, that we're looking to you for support and connections and the expertise, as we can't do it alone. And this just really has to be a group effort.
And I would just add there, and again, part of this, the onus is on us to make more of these organizations aware that, first of all, we exist. You'd be surprised that a lot of people don't know that we are a thing, you know. So making them aware of our existence and what we can do and how we can help. And I think that's one of the other charges that we have. You know, I was at a meeting the other day where they were talking about a piece of legislation that was very germane to planning, and I thought, wow, you know, this is something that had we been asked, we could have maybe, you know, written a letter of support or done something, and you know, and I talked to the person after the meeting, like, oh, we didn't know you guys had a state organization. So we own some of this, that, you know, in terms of the PR piece that we have to do, the reaching out. And so this is where I believe that building on the connections of our members and getting them more engaged with our legislative committee is a way to make this happen, you know, much easier. So. Are there any more questions?
Yeah, I'm not seeing anything else.
Okay, so having heard no additional questions, I will move on to the next slide to talk about the future efforts of the legislative committee. So, you know, obviously putting together the policy platform is great, but like we as planners, we don't like our plans to just go sit on the shelf. So we want to make sure that, you know, the legislative committee is utilizing this policy platform moving forward. So we want to find a better way to respond to proposed legislation. I mean, I think that really ties into the discussion that we just had about how do we utilize other organizations, or even perhaps a lobbyist, to help us get ahead of some of the legislation that may be just in the works in the State House, and have discussions with legislators early on versus just responding when it's up for a vote in the committee or the full body of the House. And find a better way to vet and respond to legislation that impacts our diverse membership. As Ty mentioned earlier, you know, we represent a very diverse and broad group of professionals. We have planners who work in township or rural areas, and then we have planners who live in very dense urban communities, and our issues are very different, but we have to represent everyone. So we want to make sure that in our responses that we are inclusive and equitable, and ensure that it impacts all of us equally. And the other thing is, how do we track legislation? How do we find the legislation that's working through the various committees throughout the State House, and frankly, anywhere, because as we've seen, some judicial challenges are happening all over the state of Ohio. And so understanding communities that are perhaps considering legislation or dealing with certain issues, maybe trying to help those entities out before they get up to a judicial challenge. And I mentioned earlier this idea of developing relationships with elected and appointed officials throughout the state of Ohio, and our related organizations or allied organizations, as Tom had said, because, you know, not everyone knows that AP Ohio exists, that we're professional organizations for planners. And so just making that association so that we have other individuals who know we're out there and can help us do some of the things like tracking legislation or creating those relationships with elected officials. And then again, expanding to cover other policy areas. As we mentioned at the very beginning, the list was much longer than this when we had our board retreat, and we slowly but surely kind of whittled it down to try to prioritize the issues that we were going to address up front. And so we obviously want to continue to expand that, because there are a multitude of other policy areas that we can certainly address as a part of this. Todd?
I don't have anything else to add on this one. So,
all right.
So one of the things we wanted to cover, and this is kind of just an encouragement and make you aware of the Planners Advocacy Network, which is something that the APA National has been promoting for the last couple of years, for those folks who are interested in legislative issues, it's really a way for you to get more involved. And so the purpose of this group is to really help, kind of on a grassroots level, to help inform and provide input on national issues that APA is taking a position on. The other thing is that it kind of creates what I said, a go-to group at each state. So when there is a legislative issue that's going on at the federal level, then you are then engaged in a way to be able to provide input or feedback. And the idea is that the APA is also trying to create this sense of advocacy across all of the chapters, which is one of the not only at the state level but also national and local. So they want planners who are more willing to engage on issues that affect the profession. So, I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, what this is about is trying to find a way for us to engage with our elected officials, which is really where it might happen at the local level, sometimes at the state level, but it's really very infrequent. And so it's really kind of trying to change the DNA a bit of planners, so we start to see that connection with our elected officials and trying to advocate for change instead of just reacting to it when it's proposed. So if you are interested in joining this network, and it's really not a big commitment, is essentially you're just now going to, you'll get a few more emails, essentially. But if you are you interested, if you go to www.planning.org and just /advocacy, you'll get right to it, and it says you can join now. So I would encourage anyone who's interested to go look at it. And if you go there, what it says, their pitch is that you help shape APA's agenda on these policy areas. You will receive some regular policy updates for things that are happening in DC. I find it very useful. Sometimes it's a little bit more accurate than some of the things you're seeing in the news. You will get some access to specific like tips, training, tools that are just coming to you as a member. And then if you happen to want to attend APA's national conference, policy conference that they do in the fall, then they have a special rate. So joining is easy. Being a member is easy. You're not really asked to do anything, except for give your opinion on some things, which I know lots of planners are really good about giving their opinions. So anyway, I'm just throwing it out there as something for you to consider if you do have interest in this legislative area. So I think that's it. So
one more, Todd. So lastly, this is kind of the money slide, or really the ask slide. It's opportunities for APA members. Selfish plug here, you can be a part of the legislative committee. We're always looking for more bodies to help us out with some of the things that we're working on and things we've discussed already. But you can also help us review and update the policy platform annually. It's something that we would like to put out to our members on an annual basis to see if there's additional subject areas they would like to see added or modified, the existing areas, and help us with that. And then we'd already kind of talked about this issue, but helping us track proposed legislation in judicial cases. We see our members as resources, so if you get an email or you hear of a case from a coworker or a friend or colleague, share that with APA Ohio so that we can reach out in the network too and find out if more people know about this and dig to find out the details of the legislation or the case and how it may impact the planning field in Ohio. And as Todd said, definitely join the Planners Advocacy Network as well through the APA National. So.
Yeah, I just want to emphasize, for folks who are interested, right now the policy or the legislative committee at the state level is just members of an APA board, and we would be thrilled to have more members help us, spread the work a little bit. And again, you can engage at the level you want to engage in, but if you have interest in this area, our meetings would be conference calls, so, or emails are going back and forth. It's not a huge commitment. But, your role could just be, agreeing to help, review or vet legislation that's being proposed, provide input. So, if you're interested in this area, I would encourage you to, let us know, and we would be happy to include you. So.
All right. Well, I will say thank you everyone for joining us today, this afternoon, for the webinar on the AP Ohio policy platform.
Yes, I want to thank everyone for participating. I was thrilled to see so many folks listening, and I want to thank those who submitted questions. And again, Chris, you have wrap up comments or?
No, just thanks everyone, and you can always email us at info@ohioplanning.org. I answer emails pretty quickly. And just in case you're wondering, we had 45 people on our call today, which is awesome. So thanks everyone for joining us.
And then this will be available online if they want to go watch it later.
Yep, ohioplanning.org.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.